All right, so now we're going to talk about writing parallel and perpendicular equations. So um, we're going to use this when you want to write an equation that is parallel or perpendicular to another equation. And there's some things that, just some reminders. This here. So just remember, in order to do this, we need to know that parallel lines have the same slope and perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. And so this is how you'll write an equation of a parallel or perpendicular line. First, you're going to have to determine the slope needed. Do you need the same slope or do you need the opposite reciprocal slope? And in some cases, you might actually have to figure out what the original slope is, either through looking at an equation or taking an equation from standard form to slope-intercept form. Then we're going to use the new slope in a point and plug it into the point slope formula. So just remember that the point slope formula is y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1, where we just plug in the point and the slope. And then last but not least, then we just change that point slope formula into slope intercept form. Okay, so let's try some practice. So example 1. We want to write an equation of a line through the point negative 2, 7 that is parallel to y equals negative 4x plus 1. So first we need to determine in this original equation, what's the slope? So the slope in this equation is negative 4 because it is written in slope-intercept form, so we want the number before x. So then let's think about it. We want a parallel line. The parallel slope, that's the symbol for parallel, the parallel slope has to be the same, so our parallel slope has to be negative 4. So now we're going to use the point negative 2, 7 and plug it into the slope point slope form. So remember that's y minus y sub 1 equals the slope times x minus x sub 1. Okay? So now then we're going to use the parallel slope that's needed. So we're going to do y minus 7 is equal to our slope of negative 4 times x minus our point of negative 2. So now I like to clean up the double negatives. Y minus 7 equals negative 4 times x plus 2. And now distribute. So we get y minus 7 equals negative 4x. Remember, you got to distribute to both terms in the parentheses. Minus 8. And now solve for y. And so we're going to move the negative 7. We're going to add 7 to both sides. Scroll down a little. So now we get y is equal to negative 4x minus 1. And so now this equation, y is equal to negative 4x minus 1, is an equation that's parallel to the line y equals negative 4x plus 1, but we'll go through the point negative 2, 7. Okay. All right, so let's try another example. Example 2. We want to write an equation of a line through 3, negative 1 that is parallel to x minus 3y equals 9. So remember, the first thing we need to do is be able to find our original slope. Well, because this one is not in slope-intercept form, we need to do that first. So we're going to subtract x from both sides. So we have negative 3y equals negative x plus 9. And then we're going to divide by negative 3. And so now we got y is equal to 1/3 x minus 3. Okay, so now we know that this one has a slope of 1/3. So if we need a parallel slope, remember parallel slopes are the same, it's 1/3 as well. So now we're going to use point slope form. So remember y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And we want to plug in the 0.3 negative 1, and we're going to use the slope of 1/3. So we have y minus negative 1 equals a slope of 1/3 times x minus 3. All right, let's clear up our double signs here. So we get y plus 1 equals 1/3 times x minus 3. Now let's distribute. So we get y plus 1 equals 1/3 x minus 1. And now we're going to solve for y. So we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. I'm going to move over here. So now we get y is equal to 1/3 x minus 2. And so now this is the equation that is parallel to our initial equation of x minus 3y equals 9, and it goes through the point 3 negative 1. So there are a bunch of lines that would be parallel to this original line, but not all of them go through the point 3 negative 1. All right, let's look at another example doing perpendicular. So in example 3, we want to write an equation of a line through the point 4, 3 that is perpendicular to y equals 2x minus 4. So because this one is in slope-intercept form already, let's go ahead and identify the slope. So here our slope is a positive 2. So we need a perpendicular slope. Remember, we need the opposite sign, and we need the reciprocal. So the perpendicular slope would be a negative 1/2. And so now we're going to use this negative 1/2 slope with the point 4, 3 and figure out what the equation is. So we're going to plug it into the point slope formula. So y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. And let's plug in. So we get y minus 3 equals our slope of negative 1/2, because that's the slope we need, times x minus 4. And since there's no double signs to clear up, we're going to go ahead and distribute. So we have y minus 3 equals negative 1/2 x plus 2. And don't forget the plus, you got a negative times this negative in here. And now we need to solve for y. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. And so we have y is equal to negative 1/2 x plus 5. And so now this is the equation that is perpendicular to y equals 2x minus 4, but goes to the point 4, 3. Okay. So y equals negative 1/2 x plus 5. All right, so now let's do one more example. Again, we have another perpendicular, but we want it to be perpendicular to the equation 5x plus 3y equals negative 21, and still goes through the point 4, 3. All right, let's rechange that point to negative 5, 1. All right, so because 5x plus 3y equals negative 21 is not in slope-intercept form yet, so we can't really find the slope. So let's go ahead and solve for y so we can determine the slope. y. Subtract 5x from both sides. We have 3y equals negative 5x minus 21. And then we're going to divide by 3. And y is equal to negative 5/3 x minus 7. So now we know that this equation has a slope of negative 5/3. And if we want the perpendicular slope, remember we need to change the sign, so it's going to be positive and flip the fraction, 3/5. So now we're going to use 3/5 in our point slope formula. So we're going to plug in y minus y sub 1 equals the slope times x minus x1. And so our point is negative 5, 1, so we get y minus 1 is equal to our slope of 3/5 times x minus negative 5. Now let's get rid of double sign before we do anything. So we get y minus 1 equals 3/5 times x plus 5. Now we're going to distribute. So we get y minus 1 equals 3/5 x plus 3. And now solve for y. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. And I'm going to come over here. And we get y is equal to 3/5 x plus 4. And so now here's your equation that would be perpendicular to the given equation that goes through the point negative 5, 1. All right, and that's it.